Hello and welcome to another episode of the Shrine Mechanics podcast. This podcast is all about rehabilitation of running injury. So I'm going to be talking about rehabilitation of any running injury, talking about the basic principles behind it and how to shift your thinking to enable you to essentially find out what's actually going on. Plus also going to be talking about things that are really not going to help the rehabilitation of your running injury and why that might be the case. I want to ask you to start thinking logically. So I want you to think about everything in terms of how you would approach things, how the body would approach things, but also I want you to throw out any preconceived notions before you even start. So don't think about what you think you know about running or about running injury. Just start thinking on a purely logic, steps-wise basis. Okay, so what actually is a running injury? That's the first point. Now, I tend to think of my running injuries in terms of often call things niggles, and sometimes we have full-blown injuries that are related to soft tissue. So I call niggles things where we get little bits of aches and pains, a little bit of tightness here and there, a little bit of essentially just feeling like we're not really moving quite right. And then I think of injuries as the actual soft tissue damage. So when I talk about injury, I'm talking about things like actual tissue damage within tendons, within tissues, within bones, and all these things. And actually, I think those injuries or those type of things are actually quite rare. Those injuries are also things where we've actually sustained actual trauma to the tissues. And if you imagine, there's a reason we are built the way we are. There is a reason why it's very hard to bruise your heart, because it is encased in an extremely hard case that is very, very difficult to actually break through and actually cause any kind of damage to the soft tissues behind it. So actually, it's quite difficult to cause trauma to those tissues inside without significant impact, like coming off your bike or doing anything quite extreme. So what actually is a lot of injury? A lot of injury is a kind of repetitive load. And it's repetitive load in the wrong place. Now the key thing is that the impact from running is a good example. It's not what leads to injury. I've always said that impact from running does not cause injuries. It's impact over and over and over again going to the wrong place. So, what do you do when you get a niggle? What do you do? Most people look at it and they think, right, I'm injured. I've got this problem. I need to find some way of solving it. I need to sort it out. I need to get it sorted and maybe go to somebody to see it. But have you ever actually thought about what you could do yourself? Most of us grab the kind of ice pack. Most of us then take a bit of ibuprofen and think, right, we'll carry on. So I've got to first think about why rice, resting, icing, compression and elevation might be completely wrong. I believe it is completely wrong. Because what rice is, it was designed to basically get football players, American football players, back on the pitch. That's far as I know. It was designed simply to try and abate symptoms so that they could carry on, so they could do another game. And then we've shown that again and again, that if you ice something, it decreases symptoms and allows you to carry on. But what if you've done actual damage? What is that icing doing? It's slowing the whole process down. So if you're 1 or 2 or 3 days into an injury and you're still icing, slowing down all that lovely inflammation and swelling, you also want the swelling. So you don't want to compress, you don't want to elevate, you want that swelling to happen because that's the good stuff happening. That's the body essentially increasing the flow to the blood flow to that area, increasing that swelling is soft tissue. Essentially, it's all those good things, all the little building blocks that we need to help recover and repair, getting into that tissue where they might not already get in there. That's what that swelling's doing. That's what essentially that warmth is doing. If you cool it down, if you elevate it, if you compress it, you're going to reduce the ability of your body to deal with that injury. And that's the first critical thing. Listen to your body. When we try and rehabilitate any injury, we got to do it with our body. Our body has to be the thing that we are using to guide. All we're going to try and do is maybe try and enhance the body's ability to do it just a little bit. It's a little bit like antibiotics. A lot of people think antibiotics fight infection. They don't. They help the body fight the infection. That's the critical distinction. So the same with all of these. That's why things like ibuprofen must never ever be used. Ibuprofen acts right down at that level and stops the body's ability to try and rehabilitate its own injury. If you need to use something for pain relief, something like paracetamol is much better. It acts much higher up. It acts on the sensation of the kind of perception of pain. So actually, it's far more damaging when it comes to that side of things. Okay, so what can you do? Well, you could heat a little bit. You could massage a little bit, increasing that blood flow. Or you could just leave it. That's a critical thing, is actually, maybe you're better off just leaving the injury, letting it do what it needs to do, weight bearing on it when you can, using your own head to decide this. So if you can walk on it, walk lots, move it lots. If it swells, no problem. Don't use those negative things like swelling and pain as markers that it's not improving, because actually sometimes they can be markers that it is improving, that actually we are getting more movement there, that we are actually getting the tissue repaired. Now what about a niggle? Now niggles, these are aches and pains. I always say we should move into them. So move into the niggle. If something's aching and it's tight, it's because the brain doesn't like moving it. Well, the best way of solving that is to try and move it again. If you feel like things are all stuck together, move into those positions. Move into them again and again and again until they feel comfortable. Don't push it. Don't try and stretch. There's never any need to stretch on anything, but definitely not when you're injured. But move into it again and again and try and rehabilitate the movement. And now, this becomes the critical thing. Why am I injured? Now you've got to start yourself a little investigation. Every time you think about an injury, think about it, the way I like to think about it is a bit like your bank account. An injury, a real injury maybe, is going to the cash machine, going to use your card, and it's got declined. There is not enough money in your account. Something has gone wrong somewhere. Now, if that happens, you don't just walk away and say, well, oh well, don't have any money, not a problem, let's go home. No, you need the money. You need to be able to do this. So therefore, you start an investigation. Why is there no money there? Should there be money there? If there should be, why isn't it there? So you start looking into the bank account. You start looking into seeing what's going in and what's going out. You start investigating. So let's say running. Let's start looking at investigating the contact points. What's going on with our shoes? We start looking into, well, look at the shoes and look at the foot. Are they different shapes? If they are different shapes, why am I wearing them? If I've got a foot shape that's relatively wide at the front, why am I wearing a shoe with a pointed toe box? That could be a problem. Am I putting orthotic in a shoe when it doesn't need to be there? I don't believe in orthotics. I believe they are short-term crutches that don't help anybody. All they do is send force to elsewhere. But often what they do is they constrain the foot into a very particular position. They put a lot of load. They don't distribute the load. The foot can do that all by itself. The bare foot, when you walk around, can distribute the load across its whole surface very, very well. If you wear an orthotic for a while and then you walk around barefoot, you actually distribute the load completely differently because you are used to distributing it the way the orthotic has taught you to distribute it, which can often lead to that impact injury we talked about, going to the wrong place. Okay, so you start looking at shoes. Is there lots of wear? Am I wearing a shoe like a Hoka or a maximal shoe that is very unstable? Put it on a table. Look at it from the bottom. Has there been wear? Is it wonky now? Is it leaning to one side? When I put it on, if you look down, am I kind of squidging to one side? When I actually squidge it down with my fingers, does it squidge? And if it does, that's a really bad sign. Am I lacing it up properly? Does it move around on my foot? If I put it on and take 5 big hops, do I feel unstable? Or do I feel completely locked in, like I've got nothing on my feet? These are the kind of investigations you start to do. This is what looking at my bank account, looking at what's going in and what's going out. Have I taken a big load of money out, or a big load of money's gone out without me knowing? I took a big load of training, or I did a big load of training and I didn't recover well enough from it. And that's why my bank account my bank card has been declined. These are the sort of things you've got to think of. Now, where do I come in? I'm talking about me personally as the member or the owner of Try Mechanics, someone that looks at running position, movement, analysis, essentially looking at trying to see where injuries come from. I'm the accountant. Not everybody needs an accountant, but a lot of people do. The reason they do, the same way that I do as a small business owner, is I have someone that looks at all my numbers. They put everything together. They do all the legwork for me because they're very well trained, and they're very worth their money because they save me so much time. My accountant saves me hours and hours and hours and hours of time putting things together, but also she saves me lots of money. She saves me more money than she costs me because she's well trained at what she does. And that's the critical thing, is that you can become well trained at this side of things. What I do is nothing special. What those physiotherapists do and all the other people involved in the industry they do is largely nothing special. But they have experience and they have the ability to bring all these things together very quickly, see things very quickly, and basically become very, very time efficient at putting the patterns together to try and find out what's going on. They can dial in and get right down to the root cause of the problem very quickly. So what you're paying for with these things is essentially a bit of a shortcut. You're paying to have the job done well by somebody that knows what they're doing. And that is the critical thing when you're thinking about whether to have these kind of services done. It's a bit like having something done on your house or building. You could probably learn how to do it yourself. I've done that plenty of times in the past. I've watched YouTube videos, hours and hours of YouTube videos. I've gone out and bought all the right tools, probably at more cost than the builder was going to cost, and I've had a go. Mostly because I wanted to have a go, and almost always the results are never quite right, because at the end of the day there's that lack of experience. And that's the critical thing with anything in life, with any of these things that we pay professionals to do, is all about paying for their experience. So that's what we have to decide. However, a lot of the stuff we can do ourselves. We can lead into it with ourselves, we can do all the right things afterwards like ourselves. I liken this to if you have a builder coming in, we had the option with our builder whether we wanted to do a bit of the setup work, and then we did all the tidying away and essentially all the getting rid of all the stuff because it was quite a small job. It saved us a lot of money to do that because there was no point our builder using his skills to essentially sweep the floor. I could do that. And it saved us a lot of money by doing that. So we used his skills very specifically. So you can help yourself. Before you come and see me, maybe stand in a mirror, see how you shift, look at your shoes. Start to think about all these things. Start to put these things in place. Maybe write everything down. Put all the patterns in place. Maybe start doing some rehabilitation of your injury by looking at things like, am I shifting my position when I stand on one leg? Maybe I should try and see if I can stand well on one leg and balance. Maybe that's a good first start. So you start thinking about this as this investigation. You start looking at it from this perspective. Don't just gloss over these things. Because if you rehabilitate and you learn how to rehabilitate one injury, you learn how to rehabilitate all injuries. So let's go back to the bank analogy. You've had this problem, and it's happened once. What if you budget now? Well, you write yourself out a good budget. So you liken this to sorting out all your shoes, your training, and all this side of things. So you sort yourself out a budget. And by doing that, you know what goes in and out every month. And it's much less likely that this card is going to get declined again if you do the budget and you do the legwork and you set everything up correctly and you know what's going in and out. Yes, something might come in suddenly and take a load of money out without you knowing about it or without you planning for it, and that leads to injury again, and you might need to then go back to see somebody, go back to the bank manager and say, well, what's going on? But it makes you much less likely to need that. It also means that when there's little fluctuations, like a little bit less money's come in or a little bit more money's gone out this month because of this, you can deal with it. And that's like those niggles. Those niggles are coming in, but yet you learn how to deal with them. You learn how to use them, how they show you maybe you are spending a lot of time in one position, you're standing in one position in one way too much, or you're sitting in one way too much. Then that gives you a way of changing it before it becomes a major problem. So I hope that's helped. For any more info about us at Try Mechanics, you can go on the website www.trymechanics.co.uk. We're very active on places like Twitter under Try Mechanics or under Facebook as Try Mechanics. I try and post out all the things I find very interesting about this side of things. Please feel free to ask any questions about these podcasts, about things that you might want answered, and then I'll be able to go from there. I'll be able to provide the information and give you a very tailored service in terms of these podcasts, as opposed to just talking about the random things that I like to talk about. So it's been very nice this morning. I'll let you get back to your work now. Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.